Hello, welcome back to the YouTube channel of Bethel Evangelical Free Church Hanley. I'm Pastor Gervais Charmley, and we're back in Lancashire again. This is the Church of St. Hilda, Bilsborrow. It's, as you can see, a very handsome Gothic church, but it actually only dates from 1927. That is to say, this building is not yet 100 years old. But the use of this sort of Gothic style, this is a sort of arts and crafts Gothic style, really continued until, well, after the Second World War in many places. Yes, you will find some more experimental buildings in the 1930s, but really many village churches, quite rightly, and this is a village church, preferred to use the more familiar Gothic style, the pointed arches, and in this, as I say, it's arts and crafts iteration of Gothic style. It's a building that's still very much in use, and we'll see inside some of the alterations that have been made for, shall we say, modern purposes, and that's simply a fact of a church that is still used, and is used in this case quite a lot. That things are done just as they were done in the Middle Ages, just as they were done at the Reformation, in the 17th century, in the 18th century, in the 19th century, in the 20th century. So church buildings are still being adapted as things change, and most of the time these things are not changing in a sort of revolutionary way, changing everything, but they're changing in a sort of incremental manner. The way buildings are used changes, and oddly enough, sometimes it changes back to the way things were done in the past, but we'll see some of that as we go around. As I say, this is 1927, this is opened, and it's paid for by a local wealthy lady who determines that they need a new church here, and this is the building we get. And it's a beautiful example of this 1920s style. So we'll have a look around and see what's going on, really. So as usual, we start at the west end. You can see this is a very traditional building. It's a building that draws upon the Middle Ages. At the same time, it's a building where some of the styling, some of the architectural motifs are being, well, streamlined, for want of a better word, which of course is something that characterizes then the 1930s in architecture, this sort of streamlining approach. The font, again, is very traditional. There we are, nice traditional octagonal font with a round base. So that's this room on the north side. This was added in 2015. We have there War Memorial and the list of incumbents. And because the church is built in the 1930s, of course, or the 1920s rather, the War Memorial is for the Second World War only, because of course the church didn't exist at the time of the First World War. These aisle columns are what I'm talking about, particularly about this streamlining. You can see there's no capitals. They're just straight up from the floor, and then they branch out in the arches. This is the north aisle, and we've still got most of the original pews. So there's a modern screen there because, again, things change. People want words up on a screen rather than necessarily in a book. They'd have books as well for those who use them, who need them. And this again is the south aisle, and here we have stained glass window. Of course, all the glass is 20th century because it's a 20th century church. This is the meal at Emmaus, and he was made known to them in the breaking of bread. And so there we have the pulpit, and that's it's an interesting period of the 1920s because it's this period of transition architecturally to some extent. And you can see here this pulpit wouldn't be out of place in the first decade of the 20th century. Very nice carved choir stalls. There's the priest's stall, and then there's the organ, nice big pipe organ there, and here is the tower. There is a ring of bells up there, but really mostly the tower is a light space. And then on that side that's the vestry. And there's no stained glass in the east window, essentially because nobody ever gave the stained glass. There we have Christ and a little shepherd boy. Sedilia, there's not actually a piscina, it's a shelf. And then 20th century reredos, referencing the days of creation. So, vestry through there. So there we have it, St Hilda's Bilsborrow. And yes, the screen does rather spoil the view from the chancel, but there we are, it's a living church, that's what you get. Lancashire's an interesting county because it's, this is a good sort of modern thing, 2002 introduced handrails, very good, and so often neglected, but actually if you want people who are less mobile to get up there, you need something. And another good thing here is that when they gave these chairs, these movable chairs, you can see they've all got this little gothic wheel device in the back, so that they're not just these boring, ordinary chairs. There's an effort to make them fit in with the building. So that's a very good structure here, very lovely building on the inside. And we'll have a look then at the outside. Again, as I say, the interesting thing here is it's 1920s, so there's not a lot of history behind it. But it's very late in terms of this, well, we're going to do a very traditional church. Just a few things that say it's arts and crafts movement and that suggests that it belongs to the early 20th century. But it could very easily, just as easily be 20 years earlier than it actually is in style. And that's not a bad thing, because part of the idea of this sort of pointed style is that you're saying, well, this is a church and this is the sort of architecture that we feel is appropriate. So there we are. That's the inside. Let's go have a look at the outside now. And so here we are outside Bilsborrow. I apologise for the shadow, but that's how it is. There's a massive stand of trees between me and the sun, but you can get a good view of the church in the background. The church was paid for by Mrs. Salisbury of Myerscough Hall, which is the local big house. That quite probably explains the dedication to St Hilda, of course, as an abbess at Whitby on the North Yorkshire coast. It's a very handsome building, you see, local stone, and I'm just going to pause with the Whacking Great lorry about to go past. So, exit the Whacking Great lorry. You can see here local stone, and again this arts and crafts, artisan style. Now, it's not strictly arts and crafts, it's just hints of arts and crafts, but nevertheless there's an arts and crafts element to it. And Lancashire churches can be divided really into a number of categories, one of which is this sort of category, late 19th, early 20th century, the prosperity of the area due to the industrial zones and the popular holiday destinations on the coast. And we're down here just towards Blackpool. Blackpool is a long way that way, but the exit you come off to get here is the exit for Blackpool. So there's money here, and there's growth in population, and there's a need then for new churches. A little bit earlier you've got churches that are built in the 18th century and the early 19th century that are very, very low church Protestant buildings, and here you've got more big lorries coming past. And here I think you've got this early 20th century style of a big lorry. And then further back you've got the medieval churches that are very often these long, low structures and that had enormous parishes. But this is carved out of one of the existing parishes. I'm not quite sure which one, but it is carved out. 1927, first incumbent, and it's not 100 years old yet. So let's have a look around the rest of the outside. Well, so here we are, obviously we're at the east end here, you see the tower, and you've got those lights just above the chancel roof line, they let light into the church, and then above there's the clock and the bells. There's a vestry on the north side. You can see the stair turret there with a little weathercock. It's a traditional type of weather vane shaped like a cockerel or rooster. I know Americans tend not to use the term for animals, but that's what it actually originally means in this context. So here is the vestry, and this is the north side. The north side, it's just quite a significant graveyard, in spite of the fact that there was no church here before 1927. So there's the north side. You can see there the extra room built on, and there's the organ chamber behind. No, actually those windows above the chancel, those are for the ringing chamber. So it should be rung from up there. There is a ding-dong bell lower down, and actually, yes, you can see those are the windows above the transept that let the light in to the crossing. It is a crossing because there are transepts, even though they're not real transepts. One of them is kind of a vestry, and the other is this organ chamber. But close enough, and it does mean that it is a cruciform building. It's a cross-shaped church. Modern community room, very common, of course, in the late 20th century and beyond, that what churches would do is they would add a space either externally or internally as a community space rather than having a separate church hall. And it's, to some extent, swings and roundabouts. What would you prefer? But it can lead to rather ugly structures being built onto otherwise attractive churches. I'm not saying that's a particularly ugly one. It's not a particularly attractive one either. West End, and it's a cold and frosty January morning when I'm recording this. It'll go out, I suspect, or maybe at the end of the month, but hopefully it'll be a bit warmer by that point. But here is background to the south side, the entrance side. You can see there's the porch and the aisle and so on, and then there's the crossing tower. No spire or anything like that, and probably wasn't intended to be this sort of thing. They just have a sort of embattled top. So that is St Hilda's, Bilsborrow. So there we have it, St Hilda's, Bilsborrow. I'm in shadow again because the church notice board is here. The church isn't in shadow, that's fine. So that's St Hilda's, Bilsborrow. A fascinating building, and it looks older than it is. It looks perhaps 10 years, well, perhaps 20 years in fact, older. And that's fine, because the point about these Gothic churches is they're not supposed to look brand up to date. They're supposed to look like they have a connection with the medieval period. And they've managed very well here. It's still, say, very much in use, and very good to see a building like this that's clearly well cared for. Well, thank you for watching, and may God bless you and keep you until the next time.